Nigeria House Davos 2026.
Thank you very much. And the discussion we've been giving the privilege of having this evening is From Scale to Capital, Financing Nigeria's Role as West Africa's. Nigeria sits at the heart of that. We're Nigeria House, we have the scale, we have the market, we also have the entrepreneurial energy. So without further ado, I'd like to go into the discussion. And my first question is really going to be for you, Dr. Okoje-Iweala. From where the WTO sits, it's clear that the global trading system is, I guess I could use the word challenged. It is, you would agree, ma'am. Given that sort of backdrop, whether it's geopolitics or technology, where does Africa sit in that global trade story? And what are the opportunities for us, even at a time of crisis like this, as a continent?
Well, thank you. First of all, good evening, everyone. And good evening to the Honorable Minister, and this is partly your brainchild, or all of it your brainchild, so we should give her a round of applause. It's wonderful to see all of you. You know, the thing about Nigeria is the energy. Yeah. As I was coming in, I was feeling a bit tired, but after seeing all these wonderful, I'm totally energized. And there's jollof rice and plantain and akara. Puff puff. There's also, I'm also delighted to be with Dr. Shukbo Lucy, the CEO of the Bank of Industry, who also has his pulse on the SMEs, and whom I've known for quite a long time. So it's a pleasure to be on the panel. And then I want to recognize my ambassador, Ambassador Adamu Abdullahi, who is here, Nigeria's ambassador to the WTO. So thank you. You're right, Rolake, that the multilateral trading system has been severely disrupted. It is the biggest disruptions in world trade in 80 years since the system was created. So the WTO started as the General Agreement of Tariffs on Tariffs and Trade 80 years ago, and morphed into the WTO 30 years ago. So it's both 80 years old and 30 years old. Anybody that can celebrate 2 birthdays, and you know you're really something. But the point is that this is the biggest disruption. A major member of the WTO says the system no longer works for them, and they have a lot of criticisms. That's the US. I don't agree with the actions they've taken, the unilateral actions. They know this, I say this publicly. But I do agree with a lot of the criticisms they have of the system, and we'll come to that. And Nigeria, the developing countries also have their criticisms that the system is not working as well for them, not integrating them. Africa's share of world trade is actually 3% of global trade. So it's not even as good as 4%. It has been stagnant for quite a while, which is not something that is pleasing to us. But I just want to say one thing before I move on to your question of what are the opportunities, because everybody here is dwelling on how bad things are and asking me why I'm looking very bright most of the time they see me. And I want to share that with you. But before I get there, I just want to say that one of the things that we need to recognize is that after all the disruption and the unilateral actions and the battering and bruises and the questioning of the fundamental principles of the WTO, and which I welcome actually, the system is still showing that almost 75% of world trade, 72 to be exact, is still going on WTO terms. This is very surprising to everyone, because if you listen, you think the world trading system has collapsed. But it is private sector people who trade. And they're saying much of this system works for us. It was 80% before the American actions. It was never 100% because we have some countries outside of world trade, of the multilateral trading rules. 80, it's now down to 72. But to me, that is a very strong signal of resilience. And global trade grew 2.4% last year, higher than our forecast of 0.9. This year, we are forecasting slower growth. But look, because of AI, why we grew faster last year, trade in AI goods contributed 42% of global trade growth. And if we have that continuing this year, then we could see an upside better than the 0.5. So all I'm trying to say to you is that there are important things that are happening in trade. The WTO has an agreement with 74 members who belong to it, called the Information Technology Agreement. It covers $3 trillion worth of AI-related goods, software, hardware, everything, with very low to zero tariffs, and that's helping to drive this. Now, I'll say this last one, and then I'll keep quiet. In spite of the problems we are seeing, in addition to the resilience, something is happening in trade that is rather exciting. And that is maybe why people see me going about looking quite cautiously optimistic. First is services trade. Services trade is $12 trillion. Total global trade is $30 trillion. In a $110 trillion global economy, services trade is 12 trillion. It's growing at 4.4%, so even faster than goods trade. Within that, digitally delivered services, digital trade, has been growing at 8% per year this past, I would say decade. It's projected to grow at about 6% this year, 5.6%. So it's growing very fast. So there are opportunities for us in that area, and that's where you are trying to drive. And green trade is also growing. Trade in, renewables and so on, almost 2 trillion. So I'll stop there. There are opportunities. We can go more into it amidst the gloom.
Yes, thank you very much for that perspective. A round of applause for her. I think that's really interesting that you see these opportunities. And of course, digital trade is a key enabler of trade in Africa. Trade is driven as much by tariffs as it is driven by infrastructure. We need infrastructure to enable trade, and that infrastructure has to be enabled by finance. So I'd like to hear your thoughts based on the work you do at the Bank of Industry. Many of us are familiar with that. Is how is the funding landscape for trade-enabled infrastructure shifting? And particularly, what role is BOI playing to facilitate that?
To your question, financing the digital economy requires patient capital. And we understand that very well at the Bank of Industry. One thing that has been very clear to us from the onset are the opportunities that are presented to the Nigerian economy. Research by WTO and the World Bank suggests that Nigeria can really thrive economically from investing in the digital economy space. And particularly in the jobs effort, we have opportunity to create 28 million jobs for our youth. And as you know, we have a youth bulge which we must service going forward. And so this is a very, very important sector for us to invest in. And at the bank, we committed 15% of our disbursements over the next 3 years to the digital economy space, whether it's infrastructure and of the bank's own money. And secondly, we understand that the environment now is becoming quite difficult for you to get, especially in Nigeria, for you to get concession-based financing to service some of these very critical projects. But there has to be deliberate efforts, and we are really, really encouraging the Ministry of Finance to come up with solutions, and also the Central Bank, to come up with solutions that can help Nigeria prepare for the digital age. It's very important, but at the bank we are committing resources, we're committing we are walking the talk. We're not just saying that we're going to put X amount of our money. Last year, we saw a sharp increase in all our investments in the digital space. We provided over 60 billion naira of all our disbursements to digital infrastructure. And so we are doing our bit, and we will continue.
Okay, great. And it's great to see that BOI is putting a lot of money. In terms of the barriers to accessing that funding, and I'm sure there are quite a lot of entrepreneurs, access to finance and trade finance in particular, is that an area that you're seeing improvements in for SMEs?
Yes. So there's a lot of demand now. It's not just for SMEs, by the way, because BOI is supporting the whole industrial complex, and not just small businesses. We are supporting large enterprises as well. And a lot of them have the larger ones are the ones that have the capacity to build the right infrastructure. And so there's a lot of investments now going into digital backbone projects across the country. Our largest disbursement last year was to a telecoms company, 25 billion naira, to provide digital fiber optics services.
Are you able to say what rate was offered on the 25 billion naira, interest-wise?
I think it was between 10 and 15%.
Okay.
This is standard for BOI. This is what we do. We don't go beyond that 15% all in, right, for either large companies or even smaller ones. The smaller ones get the better. There's some kind of discriminatory pricing from our side because we want to encourage SMEs. And so the smaller ones get a little bit of a rebate or a discount on the rates that they pay. But, it's not easy when the commercial rates are at the level that they are when we talk about pricing. And so we really have to think deeply about how we engage and how we prepare for the future when it comes to financing development and digital infrastructure in the country.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, did you have a response to that?
No, not a response. Just to add that trade finance, you picked up on something, is really a serious problem across the board on the continent. And some of the studies we've done with the IFC show that we're only able to, on the continent, respond to about a quarter of the demand.
Why is that, ma'am?
We just have not accorded the same kind of priority to trade finance, I think, as we should have. And if you look at the pity in it is that when we look at women who are engaged in exports, they earn about 2.5 times more than those who are selling domestically. So this is really something for us to think about. How do we increase the quantum of affordable, because it's one thing to have it, but affordable trade finance. And we're trying to encourage the development finance institutions like the IFC. We're working with them and they've increased their portfolio considerably. But we need to work with others to keep ensuring. Afrexim Bank has been active also. So the awareness on this issue, it's been there, but I think it's becoming more and more as the studies show.
Indeed. And can I just have a show of hands? Are there any entrepreneurs here who've accessed trade finance recently or tried to? Anyone? Standby, letters of credit, those sorts of things, guarantees. Okay, not many, because I know it's an area, it's a bottleneck area that needs to be unlocked, essentially.
Oh, okay, some of the international regulations also at the time of the financial crisis, also Basel III and so on, militated against, had an adverse effect of making some of the international banks withdraw from
trade finance.
correspondent banking and providing letters of credit. So that also contributed, and some of that needs to be correct.
Indeed, I'll come back to Mr. Olushesi a bit later about cross-border banking in Africa. But I want to come back to you, Dr. Okonjo-Iweala. You know, every time I've watched the news or seen the screens with all the global multilateral conversations on trade, or the bilateral or unilateral, let's be honest, in some cases, I often ask myself, where is Africa at the table? The AFTA framework is obviously forcing us to think more insularly, right? But do we have capacity now to take advantage of the current crisis and speak with one voice in relation to our trade diplomacy? Who is advocating for Africa? AGOA has practically ended, so there's no preferential treatment anymore. Where do we go from here as a continent, and what's the perspective of the WTO?
Well, we are not as well integrated into the world trading system. That's why our share of global trade has stagnated and is low. And one of the biggest reasons is trade costs. And trade costs are linked to infrastructure. We find that sometimes when you add the costs of overcoming the infrastructure gaps and other gaps we have, it can be equivalent to another 100 to 200% tariff on the goods. And we were just talking about it a little bit at a session where the Honorable Minister was also there on trade facilitation. But beyond that, we have infrastructural challenges, that should link us. We should be better linked to markets, and we're not. So we need to work on that. That's just one element. I think the biggest element on why we are not well integrated is that we keep selling the same things. Over years, we've been selling the same thing, basically commodities. We've not been adding value to our products. And there's no way, and I'm very serious about this, that we're going to capture a larger share of the global market unless we can add more value. So that is the biggest reason. The trade costs are there, but the fact that if you look, 60% or more of what we export is still commodities and not value-added material. So we need to change that. But it is changing. So to give you hope, I think many of our leaders and our ministers and, others and the private sector are realizing that this is what we need to work on. And there's an opportunity now for us to seize, especially in Nigeria. What is that opportunity? The world is finding that it has built supply chains in a way that may not contribute to global resilience. What am I talking about? There's so much concentration of supply chains in certain parts of the world. And we saw that during the pandemic. Pharmaceutical supply chains are concentrated in 10 countries export 80% of our vaccines in the world. And therefore, when the pandemic happened, before people could get vaccines, they were dying. So what do we need? We need to deconcentrate that. And Nigeria is a very good place to deconcentrate and decentralize pharmaceutical supply chains because we've got the domestic market and other supply chains. And now China is also becoming a high-cost producer. This is the time for us to present ourselves. If they want to look for other areas to invest other than East Asia, I keep telling them, why only Vietnam or Indonesia or Bangladesh, or India? Why not Brazil? Why not Nigeria? Why not some of these other places? So we need to work hard to seize those opportunities. I can say a bit more.
No, very well said. Mr. Olushisi, did you want
Yes, I just want
to make
to
comment
also,
on that?
Yes, to comment that, yes, things are changing. Manufacturing value addition in Nigeria particularly is increasing, as you can see. And so we are adding value. But then we need to be better connected to the global opportunities that exist for trade. Many of the enterprises that we are developing capacity for now are export-oriented. However, they are still facing a lot of challenges on the trade side, not on the productivity side. But we need to unlock those barriers to trade generally, not just in Nigeria, but in Africa.
Okay, so I want to come to Africa now. If intra-African trade is only 4%, it means that some of the enablers of that trade, their volumes are also low. And one of the biggest headaches many of us face, whether you're sending money to somebody in Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire, or you're a business and you're trying to pay your supply in the Democratic Republic of Congo, is that your correspondent bank is in New York or your correspondent bank is in Paris. It doesn't make sense if we want to increase inter-Africa trade. So from a development finance institution perspective, what is happening differently to unlock the bottlenecks in that area?
Okay, thank you, Rolake. In the recent years, there's been efforts to develop a pan-African payment system. And I think institutions like the Afrexim Bank have done a lot of work on that. And the World Bank has also supported that effort in addition to other development agencies. But I think the speed at which things are happening are not as fast as we expect them to occur. And that is slowing down the volumes of trade that we can see. But I think the biggest deterrent is still what they mentioned. Not just the payment systems. It's still the fact that we are producing the same things and we're not well connected in terms of infrastructure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, I'd like your perspective on that.
Sorry. Thinking through everything, I'm also moving towards trying to see what we can do to quickly accelerate implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And actually, like the minister, to say a few words herself, because Nigeria is the digital hub. And I think we're doing some good things. So it would be good to hear from her. But, intra-Africa trade, 15 to 20%.
So it's more than
Total.
the total.
Total.
Okay.
You know, EU trade is about 60%. If we are using that, since they are neighbors. So we have a very long way to go. And Nigeria has so much opportunity within Africa. Can I just say fashion? Everybody loves what we make. Everybody loves Nigerian fashion, no?
Yes.
But we haven't been able to make things to scale with sizes so we can export to other African countries without it being custom made on each one. We are missing an opportunity, and my fear is Ghanaians will soon come and seize it.
There's some Ghanaians
Nicole
in this room.
my advisor is Ghanaian. We need to do this fast. So, Honorable Minister, I'm challenging you, because I love our clothes. I think we shouldn't actually move to modernizing it too much so that everything looks Western.
Yeah.
Let's keep some flair. But people love our clothes, and we have an opportunity to, dress the whole of Africa. What are we waiting for?
It's happening already, actually.
Honorable Minister,
Yeah,
please.
it's happening already. Thank you for the
Let's hear from the
opportunity.
Honorable Minister.
Yes, there's a lot that has happened in the last 5 years. So the AFCFTA agreement is 5 years, and on the 1st of January, we released our report. But the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, of which Bank of Industry is one of about 17 agencies. We also have the Export Promotion Agency, and then Nexim. Nexim works on trade finance, really focusing. We've been working with Afrexim Bank, with UNDP, on how to practicalize and operationalize trade across Africa. The last point I'll make is that as digital trade champions, we did a mapping, and some of you are in the room. We did a mapping last April on digital trade services and where our businesses, our startups, our tech businesses want to scale. And we identified 5 markets: Ghana, Egypt, Rwanda, Kenya, and South Africa. And so in September, we brought regulators and businesses from those 5 countries to have a sandbox and to look at what it is. So the point is that operationalizing and domesticating and then encouraging private sector to actually use the promise of the AFCFTA agreement. Trading has been on 5 years. Yes, there's a lot of work to do, but we need you to move and to trust the process and to learn more about the process. We will be going around Nigeria this year to all the 6 geopolitical zones on a program with agencies from the ministry, making sure that trade facilitation and implementation, also with Nigerian Customs Service, with NAFDAC, with SON, which is also under FMITI, becomes a reality for businesses across the country. Thank you.
I want to sound a note of caution that there's a lot of trade going on in Africa, but it's not being recorded because it's not going through the formal channels. A lot of trade is done on an informal basis. If you see somebody with a suitcase of fashion apparels and all of these things going from Nigeria to Ghana to sell them, and you see a lot of people walking across borders without proper accounting from a data system that feeds into a national GDP kind of thing. Now, for us, I think it's very important that we start to put in place the right systems that will help us inform how well trade is doing in the country and in the continent as a whole. And that includes policymakers and all those that are implementing the customs, for example, making sure that they are able to track trade in a way that will be beneficial also to our finances in the country, because then a lot of people are avoiding paying the right fees, taxes, and all of these things, and tariffs. But we really have to, so maybe the challenge is for HM and everybody else connected to, to the trade policy to ensure that we really come together and find. I'm not trying to shirk responsibility, HM.
Just to piggyback
Yes.
on that, ma'am, before you give your summary, how can we capture informal trade in
I was
Africa?
just about to say something. I think Shupo is right. Informal trade is huge, and we're missing a lot of data. But what, and I think if we captured the numbers, this 15 to 20% might jump, to a much higher number. But since we don't have any on the other number, that's what we have. But to do that from the Nigeria perspective, I think we need to think creatively. And what I would like to suggest is if you offer all these the informal business SMEs first to register, because many of them are not registered. You're not going to get any data because they're crossing the border with their suitcases in hand. So they're not also registering that. Let them register as businesses informally. Let them be tax-free. Don't tax them for a number of years, 5 or 6 years, so that they can register, enjoy a tax-free. Offer them other support, incentives, platforms, introduce them to external markets. And this will draw them in, but all they have to do in return is provide information. Since they are not going to be taxed, they should provide information on what they are selling, what they are importing, how they are doing their businesses. And then you would collect this information and it would give you a better idea. And then after 5 years of being tax-free, any business should agree that, look, we've had a tax holiday, time to do our share. So I would like to depart a little bit from collecting. Sometimes collecting taxes immediately doesn't yield as much. You need to drive them in with an incentive.
Okay, stay on the mic, Dr. Okonjo-Iweala. We have about 30 minutes left, so I want to bring in a couple of questions. Yes, but I know you have to go. I was told she has to go, yes. At the time I was saying 30, so I knew that was an error. But I just wanted you to tell us if there was one reform that Nigeria could still pursue. I know the HM is really a hard worker, but if there was one thing that you think, actually, let's do this even more, out of the slew of reforms we're currently pursuing and all the initiatives, what would it be right now, given the global context, to unlock that trade potential even further?
A bunch, as you said, some good reforms are being performed and pursued, right now. I think they need to yield into job creation. This is what I also said to His Excellency, Mr. President, that we have to move from stabilization to creating jobs because that's where we are lacking. And I think it's not going to be overnight. I think they're moving in the right direction. What we need to do is map where the opportunities are. What I'd like to see us doing is continue to try to attract investment into the country because there's an opportunity now to attract all these supply chains. So if there's one thing I'd like to say, everything we can do to show Nigeria as a country worthy of investing in. That's what we should be doing. And we should deliberately have a strategy to go after those investments, to go after investors, to go to China, US, whatever it takes to let them come and invest in our country. Because as they seek to diversify supply chains, you can still see them moving in Asia. So a lot of the diversification is away from China into Asia, and now India is another move. We should attract some of that. I'm not saying all, but a good sizable chunk. Let's build solar panels in Nigeria. Yes. Because we're importing, but we can also manufacture. We have the renewable capacity. The fashion thing, let them come and invest. Let's every time we buy a piece of wax, I spend time and I miss sometimes to see where is it made. Let's attract investment to make it at home rather than elsewhere. And all the shiny new textiles that we are all wearing now, I don't think they're made in Nigeria. A lot of them are imported. Let's try to attract them. So that's what I would do. This is really my passion because I know, and pharmaceuticals, there's a chance there as well. So there are certain supply chains where we can really attract. And that's what I would be doing.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. I'd like to bring in maybe 3 questions initially. We'll take them in a go and direct them to the panel. So please keep it brief. State your name and your affiliation if you desire. And let's go.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ijeoma Okonkwo. So I've had opportunities to work with SMEs since 2018. We host trade exhibitions across Nigeria. Last year we went to Ghana, we went to London, we went to New York, we went to Houston. We took over 150 Nigerian vendors, Nigerian businesses across the globe. So this is something we've been doing since 2018. So what you were saying, ma'am, is a very, very good suggestion because the truth is these businesses we take across, they are not documented. There's no record of how much they're bringing into the system. There's no record of the revenue they were generating, even outside. So a lot of them are even afraid for documentation because the next thing is, oh, taxes are going to come up, the government is going to come after us. So if there's a system that permits them to do business for like the next 5 years and say, okay, this incentive is what you're going to get as a business owner. Please come on board, record what you're doing, let the government know, let's see how we can support. And also, I think the best way the government can even get the data for most of these business owners is collaborating with people like us who already have access to them, who have their numbers, because we've, over the course of 6 years we've been doing exhibitions, we have the record of over 1,000 business owners in Nigeria. So this would help everybody. Thank you.
One of the things you mentioned about the lack of scale of, I'm Gemi Disu, and I work in higher education. Good to see you again, man. We met in Korea. One of the things I've seen, given Nigeria's proliferation in education and the sort of dividend we have with our demographic, is they can't scale, particularly with AI, because there's a lack of education. So it might be a bias because of my industry, but what role do you see education playing in trying to upskill these SMEs so that they can actually have things that can go beyond commodity to actually trading on the global scale?
Thank you. Dr. Okonjo-Iweala?
Do you want? Actually, this very topic you raise now is something we discussed at a gathering of women CEOs and CFOs in tech. There are very few women leading big tech companies, or they are number twos. And they gathered with some of us to talk about this. And one of the topics that came up is how do we reach SMEs, and how do we skill on AI? There's a lot of worry. So you have touched on a very important problem. And we came to the conclusion that businesses cannot do it by themselves. And that we need the government, there needs to be a public-private partnership with government, interagency, in order to be able to look at how is this AI, what type of AI, how do we want to consume AI? And how do small businesses want to use this AI to enhance their productivity? And therefore, what type of skills or information are they looking for? So I think there's a need to work with government. It's not something an individual, on skilling and educating our population on this issue. And I know that the Minister of Digital Communication, there's a strategy for the country that I looked at some point, and it looked reasonable and good. So I think if they implement that strategy and they coordinate, they can actually respond to your issues.
Thank you. Mr. Olusi, please.
So thank you. The Bank of Industry is implementing the IDICE program, which is the Investment in Digital and Creative Economy program. That program is a $600 million program in partnership with the Islamic Development Bank, African Development Bank, and the Agence Française de Développement. Now, that program is really supporting digital skills, right? That is the main focus of the IDICE program. And it's over the next 5 years, it will train hundreds of thousands of young people in digital tools, in software development, and a host of other AI-related programs. And so we are really rolling out that program beginning this year. And you will see a faster implementation of the program. And so the IDICE program really is the main tool that the federal government of Nigeria is using to build up IT capacity within the country. A lot of digital enterprises will benefit, particularly those that are run by young people. And so we will see a difference now, I can assure you.
So on that note, please join me in thanking Nigeria's incredible ambassador on the global stage, Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, for her submissions. And help me thank Mr. Olusi, the MD of Bank of Industry, who are doing incredible work in supporting trade across Africa through finance.
You're demoting him, Mom.
Oh, really?
He's Dr. Lucy.
Apologies, Dr. Lucy.
I'm just teasing you.
I know some don't like to be called.